This is Norman Kopri, and I am a member of a reality show called The Real World that started back in 1992 on MTV. And yeah, I was one of the seven cast members selected. It was probably the first reality show of its style of its time.
Yeah. And let's see. Um, what kind of, I guess, experiences did you have on the show?
So the real world was such a unique concept because back in 1992, there was limited networks and MTV was just one of maybe 20 different television outlets. And it definitely was geared towards a younger voice. The interesting thing about MTV was that it was in 144 countries. So not only was the broadcast and the content, and mostly it was geared around music and creativity, but they were trying out new programming and they wanted to film what it was like being a young person in New York City. And I was going to Cooper Union right around the corner. Actually, I had some of my courses at NYU, some of my art history courses were at NYU. I used to love the library there. It's hard to imagine that it's 2025. Oh gosh, I've gotten so old. But it was new programming. And the thing that was so new is that everything was scripted. And here they were going to take seven people from different backgrounds who didn't know each other and put them in a college experience. When you go and meet people from different, backgrounds and different economic experiences, and they were going to give them a voice, an unedited, unscripted voice, which television had never seen before because there were so many regulations of characters, people, what came out of their mouth. The dialogue was pretty flat. I think a competing show was like 90210 at the time. And everything that came off the real world and what we said would have never worked on 90210. Even that cast, they would even had a diverse cast like they did. I was one of the openly gay at the time people, which television hadn't even seen that. And if they saw it, it was just kind of like, oh, it's kind of funny and silly and it's a mistake or something, and so it was pretty groundbreaking and it caught the attention definitely of the younger generation, and throughout the world, really. And people got to see what it was like to, you know, go away from your home in those first years and just try to like make it in your career. I was an artist. I still am an artist in New York. And most of the other cast, they all had creative backgrounds. And there was a lot of conflict, but there was also a lot of resolution. But being a cast member on a reality show is very different and nobody really had seen this, so there was a lot of shenanigans on each side of the fence with their editing and their stories. And um yes, it was pretty crazy in a good way, I guess.
Yeah. And from also like watching the show myself as well, I've seen like especially like there's been many topics, spoken on the show. And one of the topics I also wanted to kind of dive into, especially with like mental health and spreading awareness on that. Have you been able to, I guess, to use your platform on spreading awareness with mental health, or have you done it on this show?
That became such a key factor because it was so psychological to take people who hadn't really experienced fame in this way. I mean, they made us as famous as Coke cans. I mean, it's hard to believe, but people ran up and down the streets of New York like I was Kardashians. They don't today. So it took a long time. Mentally, it was like a lot to put on somebody's plate that didn't have this experience. Actors, they know if they're going to be famous, they have like a whole team of people around them and they hide with their money. We made no money on this show. It was like $100 an episode, and they made us as famous or more famous than Brad Pitt. And Brad Pitt came up to me and was screaming and yelling, like, I can't believe it's you, Norman. And it was a lot to take on mentally. And as they went to different seasons and they went to Los Angeles and then San Francisco with you know, they continued to bring in more and more people. And it was very interesting. I'm sorry, I'm being a little long here with this answer with mental awareness. Um, is that we were kind of like artists in a sense that we knew that there was a fame component with our music, with our work, or maybe we'd be celebrated in galleries. So the next group of people were just literally they wanted more real people. They were going to just pluck them out of odd jobs and then put them in the spotlight like this. And I noticed that MTV didn't have the infrastructure or the help, or there wasn't community, and there wasn't like the internet, and it was very hard to find things. And especially mental health, like we didn't like I didn't even know like in 1949 they started like mental health awareness, but how do you find that information? I mean, it was so hard for me to even find a book at NYU. I'd have to go through the I'd have to go through the Dewey Decimal System to go do all my research on things from Cooper Union, like, oh, that book is at Columbia, all right, go over there. Now you can get that information like instantly. It's so crazy that back in that world we lived, that a lot of people who saw the real world reached out to us in a way. Like, for instance, like the gay community still was only located like in major cities, had maybe a help center. But if you were in Des Moines, Iowa, or you were like in Nebraska, or you were like in Arizona, or you could be in Kenya, for goodness sakes, and where do you find someone to help you, and with those issues? And it does, when you feel you're overwhelmed by the world and the world can't see your perspective, a lot of mental things started to happen. And I started to notice this, now coming back to your question, with the cast members of The Real World, as I became friends with the LA season and the Los Angeles season, they were personally starting to suffer the impacts of how their lives were changed, that they could not just go to the grocery store, they could go back to their classes. And there was a couple cast members from San Francisco, and they both returned, and they were both going to the University of San Diego, I believe. And one was just so suffering because the image that was portrayed on the reality show only showed so much of her that it wasn't a full picture of her, so that when she got back to class, it was almost like she was being laughed at around the clock. And she was a very strong person, but the public awareness and how the public perceived her really wore her down, to the point that I felt personally, I brought her in, I included her, I made her a roommate of mine in Los Angeles, just because I was just so concerned with what was put on her plate. Very different. So I addressed a lot of big concerns and would lobby with Viacom and Paramount and a lot. And now today, I think they've heard it. It took many years, to try to explain. There was an incident with like Pedro Zamora before he passed away with AIDS. They put him on a press junket and they sent him everywhere. And he went to CBS to go promote the San Francisco Real World. And he had a brain aneurysm, and there was no medical help. There was nothing to help this person that was promoting your show. Like, this is someone that's paying your pensions and paying all the staff. You're really living off of all of us and being entertained by our lives, but you're not helping us, and you put us in an extremely bad mental position. You know what I mean? It was really difficult. So it was how I had to address a lot of a mental awareness, was just to try to like, fortunately, I have that, like, I'm kind of intuitive around people and sensitive, and I try to like, I'm almost like a counselor, like, how can I solve the problem? I listen really hard to a lot of people, and I try to help with what I can do in my own personal kind of space. But
Yeah.
still, we're talking from like the early 90s all the way up to the mid, it wasn't like 2020, somewhere in there, like where they started to actually bring in counselors and support, and also within the contracts, saying, if you need to speak to somebody, we have somebody. So somebody there at some point has taken knowledge, I think, probably. And The Real World, the unique thing about that was that every cast had different types of people. So it really, at first it seemed was really stereotypical, like, oh, you're the stereotypical gay person, or the stereotypical Black person, or this or that. Eventually, after having like 80 people, the stereotypes completely wash away, because all of a sudden you're like, wow, they've really brought on 80 unique and very different voices that really create the spectrum. And I really give MTV so much credit for bringing a lot of those voices on. And with that, they did bring in, I think, on the Seattle cast, Irene, and she had Lyme disease, which affected her her mental acuity. Like things would happen to her that people didn't quite understand. And so they started to bring in a lot of different voices in there that definitely could speak to this even better than I can.
And that's relating to what you said, I wanted to ask another question was, has, I guess, MTV helped you in any type of way? Like, I guess, say maybe personal wise or like, regarding to your mental health.
The most, for us, they definitely think like a corporation. They're like, okay, how can we make a profit, keep moving forward? Recently, they had during the COVID a reunion where they brought our cast back to New York. It was kind of exclusive. You had to buy it on Paramount Plus, so it still isn't generally known to the public. But people who bought a subscription at that time got to see us go back, and they put us back in the loft, and the seven of us all came back together, and you got to see us all nice and old. But at that point, they actually addressed or tried to address some things that they felt, I think, a little questionable about. At the time, I had considered myself gay. That was my identity. I came onto the show. I had dated. They asked general things. Like, yes, I went to high school. I did date girls. I had a relationship with that. But my identity when they were shooting the show was gay. Like, that's where I'd moved. But they decided to put bisexual on top of me. And then the bisexual label was painted over me. And then the entire gay community and everybody hissed at me for almost 15, 20 years, which is hard for me mentally to go out there when someone has painted, like MTV has painted this other thing on you, which you're not. You're like, wait a second, I am from Michigan. No, I'm like, these things. It's every day people have these opinions, and you can't change it. It's so huge that it does mentally kind of impact. So when MTV came back, they actually, the producers came onto the show, and we were able to address that on camera. Maybe 35 years late. What my life could have looked at like a little differently, and how people might have adjusted their attitude to me differently. But the gay community kind of like turned their back on me. They were all hissy. They're like, how dare you? You weren't even brave enough to come out. You weren't even like Pedro. And so I got a lot of like, I don't think I've ever been invited to GLAAD. It's like GLAAD used to be like a little tiny room in New York City, and I used to be really good friends with those people. And then they grew into this big organization. They've never invited me, and mentally it's difficult. It's like you carry these big weights. So you do have to like find people, and I've reached out to different people to talk to personally and friends to find a space to bring that health back in, so that it doesn't like internally make you so icky and sick that bad things continue to like happen to you. So fortunately, because I lived my life on reality television, and I lived as honestly as I could, and all that stuff, I continued that process. And I think it's really difficult for people when they do feel that they don't fit in. At the time, I didn't feel like I fit in. I mean, you couldn't even mention the word gay growing up in like Michigan. I mean, I went off to a boarding school because it was just so bad. And that was like a really horrible mental thing. And, but I continued in my path in my education to find communities and to find resources to keep me healthy. Like, I know that this just really can't be this way. And it isn't. I think if you just persevere and you are able to reach out, things are going to be like, okay, like somehow I'm okay, I'm happy and
Yeah.
silly and fun, and but it takes effort, and it's not to say that big dark days are going to come. It's nice to make relationships with people that can help you form tools and get you through life, get you through to periods, and to know like, okay, yeah, I'm gay. It's not the most horrible thing, but in the past it was horrible, and it shut you down. It literally mentally put you in a box, and you felt terrible, and you didn't want to go out with anybody or do anything, and you just didn't want to socialize because people were going to see you in some kind of context. And in the 1970s, I feel for the people that came before me in the gay community, because it was listed as a mental illness. I mean, like gay, like it's going back to the 1970s, and it was like listed as a psycho, that's so. I feel really proud to be part of a history that I was able to be openly and authentic and be myself in 1992, which I think opened such a door in a way that I could reach homes around the world just by seeing our lives, just seeing people interact. Like, oh, okay, this guy, yeah, he's gay and he's not crazy. He's fun. I want to be near that person. And I really give a credit to my cast members, Heather and Eric and Julie and Andre and Becky and everybody for being a friend, for showing up, the world what it was like to have true like friendships. And we endure today with our friendships. So that's super awesome.
I guess people my generation today who can now
Mhm.
be like openly free, like but like how you described it back then, it wasn't, nobody had that opportunity to be open like that. So
And and it's a thrill to me. You don't understand. I get such a kick and a giggle about the whole thing, when I go around and see how the world has kind of progressed. And, I've moved back to my small town in northern Michigan, and it's, a place that I wasn't comfortable as an early kid. There wasn't, but now they have their own little gay pride, and, people are moving. It's just like the whole town was like changed. And I like to kind of think, even they might not know or didn't, that I had a little bit of an impact, like it's so funny that I'd have to move away, be on a show, kind of maybe change the town from a different point of view, and was welcome to come back, you know.
yeah.
And but it's really important. Today, with the current things that are happening, I just urge all of your generation to, it's so easy. It's so easy and cliche to say, like, freedoms isn't free and your rights can go away. But really, we're seeing a time of deterioration, and we're seeing like voices that think that they're official say that you're lesser than other
Mhm.
people, and they're starting to marginalize people's voices. And I hope that your generation just recognizes how wonderful it is that you have things to reach out, and just don't give up on all the resources and all the, humanity that has come to us. We won't have it. I won't stand for it.
Yes, and I also wanted to ask, see, what kind of, I guess, like opportunities outside of the show, outside of our world, have you've been given to, I guess, like kind of spread awareness on, mental health, or, to, I guess, just to have people amplify their voices more.
It's, personally, I took on this thing because once I broke the glass ceiling, or however you say it, it was very difficult. Like, it was going to be another 10 years before you were gay to get a job and all this stuff. So I needed to like employ myself. And so don't let obstacles stop you. If there's a wall, figure out how to go under it, over it, around it, or, just say, hey, I don't even care about your wall anyway. I'm going to build a palace on the side. Screw you, And so when I realized that a lot of the cast members and people were getting opportunities that I wasn't getting, and I was losing opportunities, I was like, I'll make my own opportunity. So I helped form Gay Entertainment Television. I'm like, RuPaul doesn't have a place to go. RuPaul and I are good friends. And so we started programming it in New York. I'm like, screw it. Well, New York's a great place. And all these people who are talented can have a voice, and we can create a network and programming. So after the Real World, for about 5 years, with another group of friends all through New York, a lot of people through World of Wonder that do a lot of the programming there. Is like, they're entertainment fun. So we started Gay Entertainment Television. We had a show called Party Talk. We bring people on. So we create your own opportunities. Be a disruptor, create your own technologies, and get the microphone, take it away. Put out yourself on a stage there. And so creatively, I've just kind of moved through that path. I did see that with the Real World, a lot of people were struggling, and they wanted a lawsuit, they wanted a voice, but they couldn't. The contracts were crazy. They were like, you signed a lot of your constitutional rights away, and it was like nuts. So I said, well, why don't we create a sophisticated creative project? We'll make a movie where we parody ourselves, and everybody decide how they feel like their character was assassinated or crazy. Come to me, we'll come up with a storyline, and let's do a film. Like, MTV seems to be really like, the one thing we have is our fame, so we might as well use it. so let's just, people will put money if they know they can get it back, because people are like, oh, I know these people, maybe I'll go see this film or do something like this. So it finally came, we were going to do a horror movie because we thought our acting skills sucked. So we were like, oh, a horror movie's great because, we don't have to really act. We'll just be our personalities or whatever we want to do with our personalities. And then we heard there was this Blair Witch show, this movie that was moving up through towards Sundance. And so we pivoted and we decided to go with a comedy route and do a wedding video. And I'm like, okay, we're just going to do this crazy wedding video. Everybody have dualities in their character. And then we're going to show the whole public of like what it looks like raw footage. We're going to, script a raw footage thing. Looks kind of like, Curb Your Enthusiasm, very off the cuff, performance pieces. And then ultimately the movie is at the end and it's all edited away. So you see, people who were like a bitch, and all of a sudden they're really sweet, or you see this or that, and all of a sudden you see the comedy involved. But then we're also revealing the entire mechanism of what we went through, and it's kind of a way for us to take our lives back and to answer something without having to go through this litigation, that would have, all it would have done is like MTV would have said, these snotty little bratty kids are entitled, and everybody would have rallied around MTV, and we would look like snotty bratty little reality narcissistic kids. So so we did this film. We got up to Sundance and I got some awards and it ran around, and we were one of the first digital films. So the industry was still film. So we released this right about the turn of the century, and audience were bananas for it at the film festivals. A lot of people thought we were actually, and it's like Spinal Tap. It's very kind of like, what is this? We're watching a wedding video. I mean, I remember so many film festivals going, we don't accept wedding videos for our film festival. And then they'd watch it and they would see, I mean, Heather B is like, oh, she's a genius in this film. I mean, I edited it all around her. She is great. And so we have, our two fun people, and is Rachel Campos and Sean Duffy, who are Sean's the secretary of the transportation right now. And so it's been hidden for a long time. I sold the rights off to Warner Brothers, and it got hidden inside of Warner Brothers, and they had it for 18 years. I just got the movie back and they didn't even know. I just let it kind of slide, because if they know there's something in their vault, then they might re-up it, and it's just hidden. So now I've just gotten the rights back, and the music is like outstanding. So my goal is to try to figure out how to put it out there, because it really holds up quite well, and it addresses so much of this like mental awareness and what happened to people and the pressures they went on, and the duality, and how editing can affect people's point of view. And there's just a lot of good stuff there. It's also very funny, and I always think that you can really come at a problem through comedy. You can really address a lot of things and make some good ground when people are laughing, and they're often laughing because you would cry, right? You'd be like, this is nuts.
And do you think maybe today, I guess kind of with reality TV, do you think maybe it's kind of losing its touch with, being authentic than it was before?
It's so, I think once people had the ability to have social media show up, and be able to have an audience and be able to say, hey, this is garbage, and put out their own voice. I mean, you could see with the president. I mean, he went right around the media, and that's what has happened, is that, I think what you're going to get when you come on a reality show. It's going to be kind of sizzly. It's going to be a lot of dramatic. They're really looking for people to wear a lot of different hats and, explode on cue at any moment, and the people that know that they're being picked to explode or be crazy is that, they know that they're getting paid. I mean, there's money running through these networks, these people wouldn't be doing this if it was like $100 an episode back in 1992. I don't think these people would be running around exploding with their heads off and flipping tables and going crazy. Our point of view was that we had an opportunity to help change the way the world looked at each other and ourselves, and that was important to us. It wasn't some like, oh, we're going to be on TV and yay, narcissistic. It evolved into that once I think money started to show up, and And, money kind of changes things. People are ready to, you know, get crazy, get divorced, get married, do it all on these reality shows. And so people, there is a lot of victimization. I mean, you can't not see it with a lot of stuff. I mean, it seems like year after year, people are always trying to get some kind of union or some kind of protection. I know that there was a big kerfuffle around. There was like the deck series, and then some things happened on that boat, and people were not being drunk and being touched and being trapped, and all that stuff was kind of boiled up, and it didn't work out so well for a lot of cast members. And I think that they've reached out, and a lot of people do feel somewhat taken advantage in that way. Other people have been able to use the social media to counterbalance that. All of a sudden, either like, well, you're watching the show, but this is also happening, and they're able to have their 4 million followers or something like that, and offer a different point of view. But it is an interesting time with that. And but now we have so many platforms with people, and it is important to address, or to have a time of the year that we can start to reflect mental health, because I think people get bullied so bad on social media. They're turning themselves into their own reality shows, and they don't even know who's watching, and maybe they only have like 12 people following them, and and they're getting really insecure, and they're young, and they're getting bullied, and a lot of horrible things happen through there. And so it is more important today to have really a good mental health check, and to have some great resources. And especially if we're looking at the next couple of years, where a lot of funding and a lot of progress that we have made are evaporating. It's like, so I salute you in the awareness.
And this is kind of going to, I guess, like with, I don't know, maybe people who were on reality TV back then, and I guess who are still on reality TV. Do you think they also have a responsibility to, I guess, in a way, educate, their viewers on a lot of things?
I really think so. And I hope that people reach out and say, hey, something happened, and it was just really kind of disturbing. And there's a moment here that we can talk about, what we just saw, and how that's being perceived, and how did you go through something, and who helped you, make it through, because that was just nuts. It's so I'm hoping that as things, but that people can use their platforms to bring that out, and I don't know if that's being brought out as much. I mean, was the unique thing about the real world, is that there was no good carrot hanging over us. It was just a big old stick. It was a big old stick. And a lot of people, so we were there just really bringing out, our stories, and a more of a humanistic kind of path. I know it's kind of boring, but I think it's really important in today's world. I almost think that a real world of people dealing with, it was always about, you'd go to the grocery store, and then something would happen. But it was always about, like, okay, the LA riots would slip in. The world would slip into the real world because
Yeah.
we lived in it. And that became a conversation. And it's interesting from different points of view to then bring that in, so that people can kind of figure that out. And right now, it just seems like, from what I see, which I'm very entertained with, they're just these fantastical travel shows and luxury shows and game shows, and you're going to win someone that you love show. And it's really just not really addressing some of the bigger things in life. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
that, you're going to win a prize, and raffle an alligator and be shot out of a cannon, and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
which is fun. I did do those challenges, but I just think that that's what's kind of unique, and I think that's what a lot of people really endure themselves with, in the real world kind of thing.
Yeah. And I know we're running out of time, but I guess my one last question would be, I guess, do you have any advice for, I guess, just kind of, anyone in the world? I was gonna say, like, if you have any advice for any artist or just advice in general, really.
Oh, yes. Just you just, persevere, it's hard, but find a way just not to give up. And, find a way, not to be jealous of others. It's so hard to measure yourself against something else, and have your own goals. Find a clear space to get in your head, clear things out, even if it's just like a little walk for a few minutes and look at the clouds or look at a flower, or maybe something fell in front of you, and just, and just remember that, you're an important part of the universe and you've got gifts. And, it's the little piece of coral or the little piece of moss is just as important as a giant redwood tree. So you'll be fine. Just, hopefully you'll be okay.
Thank you so, so, so much.
You're welcome. I'm so
This is
honored that you reached out to me.